Greetings all. Welcome to Journey Thrive on Thursdays. We do these on the first and third Thursdays of each month. So if you don't happen to be with us this evening, hopefully we will see you in the near future at one of these twice a month meetings. Tonight, I am Kevin McGhee, part of Journey. I am a licensed practitioner and have been for over 10 years. So with that said, tonight I am joined by Reverend Lynn and whoever else may jump in on the call at the last minute. You never know. But tonight I want to speak about the idea of judging or judgment. And I want to take it into a little bit of a different perspective because I do believe that everybody in life is faced with periods of time and situations where they must judge. Not necessarily judging another person per se, but judging a situation or circumstances or what someone has done and whether or not it's directed at them personally or if it's just this ethereal idea that we happen to pick up. In our day-to-day lives, we are encountered with many situations, and we have to make snap judgments to keep ourselves safe, to keep ourselves from being run over by a car or any number of obstacles that life throws at us. This we know is true. And when it comes to judging on other levels of life, the idea that we judge from all of the information that we have gleaned and gathered only holds water if we take the time to truly know that we have taken the necessary steps to know what we are looking at, what we are experiencing, and is there some type of true scientific level of contemplating thought, I guess would be a good way of putting it, that provides us with the truth to make a judgment in a situation. I would like to read something out of the Basic Ideas of Science of Mind, written by Ernest Holmes. And it's in the very end of the book, page 92 and 93 from the appendix that I'm reading. And on the 5th paragraph, I believe, down, it says, "It would be unscientific as well as irrational to believe that God or the supreme intelligence holds one man in higher esteem than another. For as the Bible so truthfully and boldly declares, and let him that is athirst come, and whosoever will let him take the water of life freely." One comes to agree with the idea of Robert Browning that, quote, "all's love, yet all is law," and that there is an impersonal law as well as a personal relationship to the spirit with each of us. On the page previous, science is affirming consciousness in the universe, and that is a personal, spiritual presence and an intelligence. Also affirms that the individual's consciousness is of similar nature. Now, with religious science, we put the two together because it is a spiritual-based idea, and it's also proven by science. We have found that thought does create things. When you put enough energy towards something, good or bad, we can manifest it on a personal level. That is the personal relationship that we each have with the higher spirit, regardless of what you want to call it. And it doesn't really matter what religious belief that you follow, because there is one God, one higher power, and it flows in and through and as everyone and everything. The key element is that when you strip away the dogmas of religions, you're left with a true scientific fact that prayer can and does work. Miracles do exist. They do not have to be these great, huge things. They can be the tiniest little things. Sometimes you'll see, as an example, a plant growing in the middle of a pile of rubble of concrete or out of the side of a rock that just doesn't seem possible. And yet, by whatever level of miracle you want to assign to it, it is a miracle that this little plant can grow and possibly bloom and survive in that environment. And we as human beings are the same way. We are very adaptable. We can and do survive many, many, many things. Natural occurrences, which is the natural laws of science working, spiritual occurrences, which tie into the natural laws. The idea that we have to judge our circumstances and our situation is not a bad concept. We do it all the time. And to own it fully with the idea that we are gleaning energy, or excuse me, gleaning facts and knowledge from multiple sources before we make the choice and make the judgment of the situation to protect not only ourselves, but the greater whole of humanity and the planet we live on, is the ultimate goal. I think of as creatures of, for lack of better terminology, creatures of spirit, creatures of God. Our ultimate goal in life is to embellish and enrich the planet around us. And as I believe almost every religion I've ever studied says, and do no harm. The key element is to do no harm. So when we stand up and voice our opinions, when we're speaking up or for ourselves or for someone or some other group or some segment of humanity or the animal kingdom or the planet as a whole, we are making a judgment to speak up and lift up those areas that seem to be less energized, less powerful, or in need of assistance. And that can be a group of people, that can be an animal, an endangered species, it can be the planet Earth itself, it can be the air we breathe. When we speak up, we are making a judgment against whoever is trying to do harm. So in essence, judging in that level of thought or consciousness is actually using the God consciousness that we have all been born with. And that is the only way that we can carry ourselves from point A to point B beyond what we see as the chaos in the world as we are experiencing right now. Not the first time it's happened in history, and it won't be the last, but carry us beyond this particular time of chaos to the other side of the clearing, where we can get back to a period of peace and unity and happiness and joy for the whole world. And it is possible. The planet is set up in a way that it is possible for us to do that. Science has proven it before. There have been periods of time in history when peace has prevailed for generations, and it can and will again. So with that, I invite everybody just to think about when you're making a judgment in life. If you're seeing something you don't like, is it something that is you don't like it because it's hurting someone, yourself, or another in a way that is against the principles of nature and God? And if so, how can you voice your opinion without becoming radicalized about it? Sometimes radical honesty and truth is the only way to do it. That doesn't necessarily mean that you have to take it to a physical level of lashing out at anybody. And yet at the same time, the physical level of being vocal, voting, making sure that your representatives and the people who represent you in life are the ones that are actually representing you wholly and fully, and the things that you stand for. Because the bottom line is who one supports in life shows more about the person doing the supporting than the person being supported. Your core shows through by who you support in life, who you give your dollars to, who you vote for, who you put in a position of power to make rules and regulations. And those judgments are the most valuable ones you can make. Thank you, and have a good evening. And now I'd like to invite Lynn, Reverend Lynn, if she has any comments she would like to make to participate, since it's just the two of us this evening, which happens on occasion. Lynn?
Had to unmute there. Thank you, Kevin. Interesting conversation, and I like your question to really think about when do we feel judgment, or you know, it caused me to kind of look at times when I am judgmental, and I try not to be judgmental because I'm, you know, a practitioner first and a minister in science of mind, religious science, and you know, there are people who tell us that when we're not judgmental or not really too passionate about things, that we're in spiritual bypass, or we're not really being real. And sometimes that's true, and sometimes that's not true, because I tend to look at the whole idea of oneness. And if I'm judging something, I'm judging a piece of myself. So what is that more about me? And my mind does that work. However, I'm also human, and I find those times where I do get judgmental, or I will judge something for different reasons. And sometimes girls will judge things, you know, for different reasons than guys do too. So I fall into all those categories, and maybe that just makes me human. And I want to look at everything from a basis of that oneness idea, like the passage you read, that, you know, God doesn't look at, the creator never created one man over another. So I want to live from that place, but I'll find myself being judgmental kind of spontaneously about something. And I realize that's ego. And so then I'm talking to you know, looking at myself on that one, my ego's doing that, or something's petty, or something will trigger an anger even. And I'm judgmental in anger. And I realize that's something from the past. So, you know, as much as I consciously try not to be judgmental, it certainly happens for sure. And politics might be the thing that has got me the most judgmentally passionate, or passionately judgmental over the past 10 years, and to the point where I almost broke my television one time and had to leave the house. And then it's like, what am I doing? What am I doing? And why am I responding this way? What is that? So, you know, for me, it provides work, internal work, when I get to that point. And you know, and there's a lot of people around me that get judgmental because they're not in that place where I am, consciously in consciousness about what's going on. And those are interesting, because people will get angry sometimes when you don't agree with them or act the same way they do about something.
Right.
So that's a whole nother thing to deal with. And sometimes I fake it.
Sometimes we have to.
And then I do a prayer, you know, I do a treatment. But yeah, interesting conversation. I really like that. And at one point early, you were talking about that we can, in just normal judgment in life, we can be in a situation, and a form of judgment is how we look at things, is how we address something or move into something, or it's a form of judgment when you choose, taking one road or the other road, in some capacity. And we can look at situations that come up and in judgment come from a place of even creating a victimhood about something, or doing or not, or looking at, well, maybe this is something that will grow me. If something in the past made me feel like a victim, maybe I can look at this situation like two sides of the same coin. And maybe this time if I'm going to judge, it's going to be in a judge of something good coming instead of victim.
Exactly.
So lots of ways we can play with it.
And to add to what you were just saying, 2 points actually, or 1 point, depending on how you look at it, is as religious scientists and practitioners of religious science and the science of mind say, God is living through us. So in that respect, God is living through us, and in the judgments that we make, it is God guiding us when we make judgments that are hopefully educated and thought out to not only protect ourselves, but the world in which we live in and the people around us, our humanity and the animal kingdom and the plants and everything. And also, you made a point earlier, and I'm trying now to go back onto it to think about it, because when God doesn't show favorites, that was the point, that he's not putting anybody higher than another one. And yet at the same time, because human beings have free will and free choice, we can cut ourselves down by our actions to be lesser than another by our own actions.
Right.
If somebody comes in and is doing things that is inherently against all of the good that nature and science and God and spirit creates for us, and is doing things to hurt other people blatantly, or animals, or the world, then they have reduced themselves down to being a lesser being of God. God didn't do it. They've done it themselves.
Right.
So if you take it into perspective that God works through all of us, and even though God may be in a person or a situation that is a negative and is running in a negative, God isn't stopping that person or situation to lowering themselves below the people and the situations around them that are running on a higher vibrational level. If that makes sense. Human beings have the free choice, free will, and we can reduce ourselves to being lesser than another man by our own actions and the things that we do and support and project out into the world.
Right.
So I have to just, I think always of what my mom used to say, and it's a funny thing because my parents, for the most part, were pretty colorblind when it came to people. They knew people with different colors and all that. It wasn't like that, but they had a level of respect for everybody, unless they did something wrong. And my mom used to say, for what it was worth, she was like, trash is trash. It didn't matter what color it was. If you're going to behave a certain way, then you're reducing yourself down to this level, is basically what her attitude was.
Yeah.
And she always wanted us kids to grow and be better and stronger, and the way she was raised. And I think every parent wants their children to be just a little bit higher up and better than they were, generally speaking. And my parents were just like, they didn't look at people because they had a poor house or a poor lifestyle or whatever and think less of them because they didn't have affluence or money or whatever. And at the same time, they were like, your actions speak louder than what you have or you don't have. The richest people in the world can be like way down on the totem pole as far as the level of good and who they are in the world and what they project into the world. So money doesn't necessarily mean anything. It really doesn't. And at
Right.
the same time, you can take somebody that's barely has a pot to cook in, and they can always be willing to share and always willing to be giving out and doing for others, even though they can barely do for themselves. And those people have elevated themselves up to being better human beings than others by their own actions. So again, as the saying goes, actions speak louder than words.
Yes.
So,
I heard someone say not too long ago that in this third dimensional reality, part of the elements of this third dimensional reality is that there is we are raised with a sense of duality, and that's what we're trying to work through. And in our own minds, we can create that duality and separation ourselves, which is what you're describing, and how we can make ourselves feel less than others in our personalities and stuff. And one of the passages that you read, the phrase was, my mind, everyone has a personal relationship with God and with a loving God, and a relationship with the impersonal law.
yes.
Okay, I can't remember what the exact words were. And I have to say, when I first got into Science of Mind, which is back in 2002, I had the hardest time with that phrase. It took me a long time to understand the impersonal law. And I'm not sure why, and maybe it was just my own upbringing that everything is so separate, and people are so separate from each other. That's how I was raised, and there are classes of people, and I was part of a family that had we were quite poor, actually, kind of growing up, and yet some of my family members were so judgmental about others. I mean, it was like anything to kind of make them feel a little higher, I guess. So when I came into this information, the idea that there was an impersonal law that did not judge, and it was God, and that everybody was equal and the same in the eyes of God, because we're made from that. That was quite an awakening for me.
Right.
And then not to judge others, because we are all unjudged by God. So
When it comes down to it, I think that the personal relationship we have is where our power lays within us.
yeah,
And that, I think, is what guides us to do either the right thing or correct something that is what we chose to do that's the wrong thing in the moment. And as humans, we make mistakes, and sometimes repeatedly, until we finally learn the lesson that we're needing. And at the same time, I think that is where the key elements of asking for forgiveness comes in. When we realize we're making the same mistake over and over again, and we have to ask for forgiveness, not from outside of ourselves, but from that power within us, that we keep torturing ourselves, that we keep doing the same thing over and over again, even though it hurts or it creates some sort of a painful situation for us to live through. And that's where the asking for forgiveness comes for our sins, so to speak.
Mhm.
Of course, I've said this before in previous talks, and I think Reverend Pat Powers probably is the first one I heard say it. His sin is just self-inflicted nonsense. I don't think it actually has a whole lot of power unless we give it power. And once we acknowledge something that we've done that is nonsense that we shouldn't have been doing or have done in the past and it didn't work out well then, and we ask for forgiveness to ourselves, from that God within us, that we acknowledge what we've done, and we're asking ourselves to forgive us, that we are to forgive ourselves from within, we won't do it again.
Mm.
You know, you're learning your lesson. And I think that level of forgiveness is actually one of the things that's like a graduating point for learning the lessons. It's like, oh, wow, okay. And when you can forgive yourself, all of a sudden it really hits home that it is personal. It is this personal relationship that you have. And that is the personal connection to spirit, where you're acknowledging that that's inside of you. And that's who you're answering to. That's who you have to answer to. So,
Yeah.
and I think this falls in line with people that are suffering through or from any form of addiction, well, any kind at all, because I think it covers pretty much the gambit for everything that is anything that we do that creates a situation that creates harm or pain in our own lives, and realizing that we can ask ourselves for forgiveness truly, and it's not just us, it's not on the ego level, but it's that spirit within us. And that's what gives us the strength to rally back and not do it again, and not fall victim to whatever the situation may have been. So
Wonderful.
again, that's creating a judgment for our own situation, our own lives, and ourselves, upon ourselves. And so I think judging is something that on some level, and if it's done with the thought process that I was speaking of earlier, judging is actually God working through us to not only better us, but better the world around us in which we live and we were created to live at this time for, and ultimately to do no harm.
I think that is the perfect sentence to kind of end this discussion with. I love that. I want to leave it right with that. God working through us.
Exactly.
Yeah. So did you have some ending information that you want to share, or?
Well, we have a ongoing fund that we use to keep Inner Journey going and thriving, so that we can keep the lights on where we have our offices, and we keep everyone doing what they need to be doing and the bills paid and all of that. So the text number for tithing, if you will, or if you'd like to make a contribution, a portion of it I do get for my evening's talk. And the rest of it goes to Inner Journey for keeping the bills on and all of that. And it's 405-337-9739. It's not my fancy one tonight. I couldn't find that one, so maybe next week. And I believe, Lynn, there is a innerjourney.org. There is an online spot where you can go also to make a donation or a tithe. It's actually the easiest way possible. It's really the text. They make it so easy for you to donate
Yes.
money that way. But again, it's 405-337-9739. And my word for this evening is love, LOVE, so that they know which message you were donating to and tithing from. And I believe that is all I have for this evening.
Well, that is wonderful. Thank you. Would
You
you
are
like to
very
say
welcome.
a short benediction to close us out?
I was just going to ask you if you wanted to do a closing for us, since we did.
I will. I would be honored to do that. So, how wonderful it is to sit in this space. And I recognize that in our discussion tonight on judgment, and it is God working through us, it is that one, that presence, that divine, that is always working through us, in us, as us, through us, assisting and helping us to find our way to grow and to evolve and to be the best that we can be, to understand what goes on around us and our relationship with it, and how we can see the world through the eyes of love and through forgiveness and through just understanding what is going on. And so I'm grateful for this discussion tonight, grateful for Kevin, our practitioner, to show up and in this light and in this way and provide this information. And so I know that all goes well for the rest of this evening in peace and in love and in harmony, and we just let that be. And so it is.
And so it is.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a good evening. And I believe this is the end of the recording.
Yes, it is. Have a wonderful night.
You too.
We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.